European migrant crisis migration. Statistics. Sea and land arrivals to the EU. 2014 equals. According to the International Organization for Migration, IOM, up to 3,072 people died or disappeared in 2014 in the Mediterranean while trying to migrate to Europe. Overall estimates are that over 22,000 migrants died between 2000 and 2014. In 2014, 283,532 migrants irregularly entered the European Union, mainly following the central Mediterranean, Eastern Mediterranean and Western Balkan routes. 220,194 migrants crossed EU sea borders in the central, Eastern and Western Mediterranean, a 266% increase compared to 2013. Half of them had come from Syria, Eritrea, and Afghanistan. Of those arriving in southern Europe in 2014, the vast majority, 170,664, a 277% increase compared to 2013, arrived in Italy through Libya, whereas a minority, 50,834, a 105% increase, arrived in Greece through Turkey. 62,000 applied for asylum in Italy, but most Syrians and Eritreans, who comprised almost half of the arrivals in Italy in 2014, did not stop in Italy, but continued their journey towards Northern Europe, Germany and Sweden in particular. 2015 equals. In 2015, a shift took place, with Greece overtaking Italy as the primary point of arrival and surpassing in the first 6 months of 2015 the numbers for the whole of 2014. 67,500 people arrived in Italy, mainly coming from Eritrea, 25%, Nigeria, 10%, and Somalia, 10%, whereas 68,000 arrived on the islands of Greece, mainly coming from Syria, 57%, and Afghanistan, 22%. In total, 137,000 migrants crossed the Mediterranean into Europe in the first 6 months of 2015. As of April 17, 2015, the total number of migrants reaching the Italian coasts was 21,191 since January 1, 2015, with a decrease during the month of March due to bad weather conditions, and a surge since 10 April, bringing the total number of arrivals in line with the number recorded in the same period in 2014. However, the death toll in the first 4 months of 2014 was 96, compared with 500 in the same period in 2015. This number excluded the victims of the shipwrecks on 13 and 19 April. In early August 2015, the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees said that 250,000 migrants had arrived in Europe by sea so far in 2015, 124,000 in Greece and 98,000 in Italy. According to Frontex, July set a new record for a single month, with 107,500 migrants estimated to have entered the EU. Frontex detected 615,492 irregular entries into the EU in the third quarter of 2015 and 978,338 entries in the fourth quarter, bringing the total number of detections of irregular entries at EU sea and land external borders in 2015 to 1.82 million, 872,938 in Greece, 764,038 in Hungary and Croatia and 153,946 in Italy, associated with an estimated 1 million individuals irregularly entering the EU, because most migrants following the Western Balkan route were double counted when arriving in Greece and then when entering the EU for the second time through Hungary or Croatia. According to IOM and UNHCR estimates, around 1 million migrants and refugees arrived in Europe till December 21, 2015, 3 to 4 times more than in 2014. Just 3%, 34,215, came by land to Bulgaria and Greece, the rest came by sea to Greece, Italy, Spain, Cyprus, and Malta. The vast majority arrived by sea in Greece, 816,752, 150,317 arrived by sea in Italy, with a slight drop from 170,000 in 2014. Half of those crossing the Mediterranean were from Syria, 20% were from Afghanistan and 7% from Iraq. IOM estimated that a total of 3,692 migrants and refugees lost their lives in the Mediterranean in 2015, over 400 more than in 2014, of whom 2,889 in the central Mediterranean and 731 in the Aegean Sea. equals 2016 equals. In January and February 2016, over 123,000 migrants landed in Greece, compared to about 4,600 in the same period of 2015. In March, following the closing of the Western Balkan route by Macedonia and the entry into force of the EU-Turkey deal on 20th March, the number of migrants arriving in Greece dropped to 26,460, less than half the figure recorded in February. Syrians, Afghans and Iraqis continue to account for the largest share of the migrants arriving in Greece. This downward trend continued in April, when only 2,700 migrants arrived in Greece, decreasing by 90% compared to the previous month. Meanwhile, due to improved weather conditions, the number of mainly African migrants crossing the sea to Italy doubled between February and March, reaching nearly 9,600 in March 2016, compared to 2,283 in March 2015. In April, on the contrary, the number of migrants arriving in Italy, 8,370, dropped by 13% compared to the previous month and by 50% compared to the same month in 2015. Despite this, Italy exceeded the totals for Greece for the first time since June 2015. On 16th of April, a shipwreck of a large boat between Libya and Italy was reported, in which as many as 500 people may have died, in one of the worst disasters since April 2015. More than 66,000 mostly African migrants have arrived in Italy since the start of 2016. The mass influx of migrants into Europe was not seen favorably in many European Union countries. Many citizens disapproved of the EU's handling of the migrant crisis, with 94% of Greeks and 88% of Swedes disapproving of the measures taken, among other countries with similar disapproval rates. This contributed to the creation and implementation of the EU-Turkey Refugee Agreement, which was signed in March 2016. From that point on, the numbers of refugees entering Greece decreased. In February 2016, the last full month before the deal, 57,066 migrants arrived in Greece via the sea. From that point on, discounting March, the highest number of migrants reaching Greece via the sea was 3,650, in April. While there is no direct connection to the implementation of the EU-Turkey deal, the number of migrants arriving in Italy in that same time period has increased. From March 2016 to October 2016, 140,358 migrants have arrived in Italy via the sea, which averages out to roughly 20,051 migrants per month. Overall, the number of migrants arriving into the EU has dropped, but the EU still is creating agencies and plans to mitigate the crisis. In addition to the EU-Turkey Refugee Agreement, the European Border and Coast Guard Agency was launched on October 6, 2016. 2017 equals. Data released by the International Organization of Migration, IOM, for the third quarter of 2017 recorded 146,287 total arrivals to Europe, of which 137,771 were by sea. This is less than half the total recorded by the end of September 2016. The greatest decrease in influx was noted on the eastern Mediterranean route. Despite an 86% drop in the number of migrant and refugee arrivals in September 2017 when compared to September 2016, Greece has observed a steady increase in the number of migrants from September 2016 till date. Further, while Italy also noted lower number of migrant arrival in 2017, there was a significant jump in the number of migrants reaching Spain, with over 16,000 having arrived in the country. Like Spain, the island nation of Cyprus registered approximately an eightfold increase in the number of migrants arriving last year and this year. Closure of segments of certain heavy traffic routes such as the central and eastern Mediterranean is responsible for the marked decrease in the number of migrants from the Middle East in 2017. However, the Western Mediterranean route is still in full use to facilitate the growing number of illegal immigrants from Africa. Nigerians topped the list of illegal immigrants into Italy in 2017, forming 16% of the total number of arrivals there. In February 2017, Italian government accepted to fund Libyan Coast Guard. Since then, many migrants were forced to go back to Libya. 2018 equals. On 7th of October, 2018, at least 10 migrants are believed to have died in a boat off the coast of Morocco. Helena Molino, founder of the group Walking Borders, told the reporters the migrants constantly appealed for help from Spain and Morocco before they died. Asylum applications. equals 2014 equals. According to Eurostat, EU member states received 626,065 asylum applications in 2014, the highest number since the 672,000 applications received in 1992. The main countries of origin of asylum seekers, accounting for almost half of the total, were Syria, 20%, Afghanistan, 7%, Kosovo, 6%, Eritrea, 6%, and Albania in 2014. Decisions on asylum applications in the EU made at the first instance resulted in more than 160,000 asylum seekers being granted protection status, while a further 23,000 received protection status on appeal. The rate of recognition of asylum applicants was 45% at the first instance and 18% on appeal. The main beneficiaries of protection status, accounting for more than half of the total, were Syrians, 68,300 or 37%, Eritreans, 14,600 or 8%, and Afghans, 14,100 or 8%. Four states, Germany, Sweden, Italy and France, received around two-thirds of the EU's asylum applications and granted almost two-thirds of protection status in 2014. Sweden, Hungary and Austria were among the top recipients of EU asylum applications per capita, when adjusted for their own populations, with 8.4 asylum seekers per 1,000 inhabitants in Sweden, 4.3 in Hungary and 3.2 in Austria. 2015 equals. In 2015, EU member states received 1,255,640 first-time asylum applications, a number more than double that of the previous year. The highest number of first-time applicants was registered in Germany, with 441,800 applicants, or 35% of all applicants in EU states, followed by Hungary, 174,400, or 14%, Sweden, 156,100, or 12%, Austria, 85,500, or 7%, Italy, 83,200, or 7%, and France, 70,600, or 6%. Compared with the population, the highest number was registered in Hungary, with 17.7 asylum seekers per 1,000 inhabitants, Sweden, 16, Austria, 10, Finland, 5.9, and Germany, 5.4. The three main countries of citizenship of asylum applicants, accounting for more than half of the total, were Syria, with 362,800 applicants, or 29% of the total, Afghanistan, 178,200, or 14%, and Iraq, 121,500, or 10%, followed by Kosovo, 5%, Albania, 5%, Pakistan, 4%, Eritrea, 3%, Nigeria, 2%, and Iran, 2%. 333,350 asylum applicants were granted protection in the EU in 2015 following a positive decision on their asylum application. The main beneficiaries of protection status were citizens of Syria, 50% of the total number of persons granted protection in the EU, Eritrea, 8%, Iraq, 7%, Afghanistan, 5%, Iran, 2%, Somalia, 2%, and Pakistan, 2%. The EU countries who granted protection to the highest number of asylum seekers were Germany, who granted protection to 148,200 people, Sweden, 34,500, Italy, 29,600, and France, 26,000. The rate of recognition, i.e. the share of positive decisions in the total number of decisions, was 52% for first instance decisions in the EU and 14% for decisions on appeal. The citizenships with the highest recognition rates at first instance were Syria, 97.2%, Eritrea, 89.8%, Iraq, 85.7%, Afghanistan, 67%, Iran, 64.7%, Somalia, 63.1%, and Sudan, 56%. In the first 3 months of 2015, the number of new asylum applicants in the EU was 184,800, increasing by 86% if compared with the same quarter in the previous year but remaining stable if compared to the last quarter of 2014. More than half applied for asylum in Germany, 40%, or Hungary, 18%. The main nationalities of the applicants were Kosovo, 48,875 or 26%, Syria, 29,100 or 16%, and Afghanistan, 12,910 or 7%. In the second quarter of 2015, 213,200 people applied for asylum in the EU, up by 15% compared with the previous quarter. 38% applied for asylum in Germany, followed by Hungary, 15%, and Austria, 8%. The main countries of citizenship of asylum seekers, accounting for more than half of the total, were Syria, 21%, Afghanistan, 13%, Albania, 8%, Iraq, 6%, and Kosovo, 5%. In the third quarter of 2015, July to September, EU countries received 413,800 first-time asylum applications, almost double the number registered in the previous quarter. Germany and Hungary were the top recipients, with 26% each of total applicants. One-third of asylum seekers were Syrians, 33%, followed by Afghans, 14%, and Iraqis, 11%. In the fourth quarter of 2015, there were 426,000 first-time applicants, mainly Syrians, 145,130, Afghans, 79,255, and Iraqis, 53,585. The top recipients were Germany, 38% of the total, Sweden, 21%, and Austria, 7%. In August 2015, the German government announced that it expected to receive 800,000 asylum applications by the end of the year. Data released by Germany's Federal Office for Migration and Refugees, BAMF, in January 2016 showed that Germany received 476,649 asylum applications in 2015, mainly from Syrians, 162,510, Albanians, 54,762, Kosovars, 37,095, Afghans, 31,902, Iraqis, 31,379, Serbians, 26,945, Macedonians, 14,131, Eritreans, 10,990, and Pakistanis, 8,472. In 2015, Germany made 282,762 decisions on asylum applications. The overall asylum recognition rate was 49.8%. 140,915 decisions were positive, so that applicants were granted protection. The most successful applicants were Syrians, 101,419 positive decisions, with a 96% recognition rate, Eritreans, 9,300 positive decisions, 92.1% recognition rate, and Iraqis, 14,880 positive decisions, 88.6% recognition rate. Sweden received 162,877 asylum applications in 2015, mainly from Syrians, 51,338, Afghans, 41,564, Iraqis, 20,857, Eritreans, 7,231, and Somalis, 5,465. In 2015, Sweden granted protection to 32,631 asylum applicants, whereas it rejected 9,524 applications. The proportion of positive decisions out of materially considered applications was 77%. The main beneficiaries of protection were Syrians, 18,523 positive decisions, with a 100% recognition rate, Eritreans, 6,542 positive decisions, 100% recognition rate, and Afghans, 1,088 positive decisions, 74% recognition rate. 2016 equals. In 2016, according to Eurostat, most of the non-EU 28 asylum seekers in EU 28 originated from Syria. Syria, Afghanistan and Iraq together make 50% of the grand total. 2017. The second quarter of 2017 recorded a 54% decrease in the number of first-time asylum applicants as compared to the second quarter of 2016, and 11% fewer applicants than the first quarter of 2017 as well. The greatest number of applications were from Syria, Afghanistan, and Nigeria, giving a clear indication of the current nodes of this crisis. However, the number of Syrians and Afghans continued to be less than that of the same time in 2016, suggesting that perhaps the peak of this crisis has passed. Initially looking at the noticeably fewer number of both migrants and applications indicates that this crisis may be on the decline. But the increasing number of illegal immigrants from Africa simply suggests that the direction of the crisis is changing. While Germany recorded the highest number of first-time applicants, over 49,000, Spain saw a 30% increase in the number of asylum seekers, along with Cyprus and Bulgaria. Origins and motivations. Ascertaining motivation is complex, but, according to the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, most of the people arriving in Europe in 2015 were refugees, fleeing war and persecution in countries such as Syria, Afghanistan, Iraq and Eritrea. According to UNHCR data, 84% of Mediterranean Sea arrivals in 2015 came from the world's top 10 refugee-producing countries. According to UNHCR, the top 10 nationalities of Mediterranean Sea arrivals in 2015 were Syria, 49%, Afghanistan, 21%, Iraq, 8%, Eritrea, 4%, Pakistan, 2%, Nigeria, 2%, Somalia, 2%, Sudan, 1%, the Gambia, 1%, and Mali, 1%. Asylum seekers of 7 nationalities had an asylum recognition rate of over 50% in EU states in the first quarter of 2015, meaning that they obtained protection over half the time they applied. Syrians, 94% recognition rate, Eritreans, 90%, Iraqis, 88%, Afghans, 66%, Iranians, 65%, Somalis, 60%, and Sudanese, 53%. Migrants of these nationalities accounted for 90% of the arrivals in Greece and 47% of the arrivals in Italy between January and August 2015, according to UNHCR data. Wars fueling the crisis are the Syrian civil war and the Iraq war, the war in Afghanistan, the war in Somalia and the war in Darfur. Refugees from Eritrea, one of the most repressive states in the world, flee from indefinite military conscription and forced labor. Some ethnicities or religions from an originating country are more represented among the migrants than others. For instance, Kurds make up 80 to 90% of all Turkish refugees in Germany. Migrants from the Western Balkans, Kosovo, Albania, Serbia, and parts of West Africa, the Gambia, Nigeria, are more likely to be economic migrants, fleeing poverty and lack of jobs, many of them hoping for a better lifestyle and job offers, without valid claims to refugee status. The majority of asylum applicants from Serbia, Macedonia and Montenegro are Roma people who feel discriminated against in their countries of origin. The influx from states like Nigeria and Pakistan is a mix of economic migrants and refugees fleeing from violence and war such as Boko Haram insurgency in northeast Nigeria and the war in northwest Pakistan. According to UNHCR data, 58% of the refugees and migrants arriving in Europe by sea in 2015 were men, 17% were women and 25% were children. Of the asylum applications received in Sweden in 2015, 70% were by men, including minors. Men search for a safe place to live and work before attempting to reunite later with their families. In war-torn countries, men are also at greater risk of being forced to fight or of being killed. Among people arriving in Europe there were also large numbers of women and unaccompanied children. Europe has received a record number of asylum applications from unaccompanied child refugees in 2015, as they became separated from their families in war, or their family could not afford to send more than one member abroad. Younger refugees also have better chances of receiving asylum. Some argue that migrants have been seeking to settle preferentially in those national destinations offering more generous social welfare benefits and hosting more established Middle Eastern and African immigrant communities. Others argue that migrants are attracted to more tolerant societies with stronger economies, and that the chief motivation for leaving Turkey is that they are not permitted to leave camps or work. A large number of refugees in Turkey have been faced with rather difficult living circumstances. Thus, many refugees arriving in southern Europe continue their journey in attempts to reach northern European countries such as Germany, which are observed as having more prominent outcomes of security. In contrast to Germany, historically a popular final destination for the EU migrants, France saw its popularity erode in 2015 among migrants seeking asylum. Refugees coming specifically from the Middle East have been attempting to seek asylum in Europe rather than in countries surrounding their own neighboring regions. In 2015, over 80% of the refugees whom arrived in Europe by sea came from Syria, Iraq, and Afghanistan. Routes in which these refugees face while attempting to arrive in Europe are most often extremely dangerous. The jeopardy to endure such routes also supports the arguments behind certain refugees' preferential motivations of seeking asylum within European nations. Migrant routes, development and responses in individual countries. In September 2015, Europol estimated there were 30,000 suspected migrant smugglers, which rose to 55,000 in 2016 and a further 10,000 more in 2017. Of the smugglers, 63% are from Europe, of which 45% are from Balkan countries, 14% from the Middle East, 13% from Africa and 9% from Eastern Asia. As of May 2017, Frontex, the European Border and Coast Guard Agency, identifies the following 8 main routes on sea and on land used by irregular migrants to enter the EU. Western African route, sea passage from West African countries, into the Canary Islands, i.e. territory of Spain. Western Mediterranean route, sea passage from North Africa to southern coast of Spain, also including the land route through the borders of Ceuta and Melilla. Central Mediterranean route, sea passage from North Africa, particularly Egypt and Libya, towards Italy and Malta across the Mediterranean Sea. Most migrants taking to sea on this route do so on vessels operated by people smugglers. NGOs such as Save the Children, MSF and German organization CI operate search and rescue ships in this area, bringing migrants to Europe. Apulia and Calabria route, sea passage of migrants from Turkey and Egypt to enter Greece and then cross the Ionian Sea towards southern Italy. Since October 2014, classified by Frontex as a subset of the Central Mediterranean route. Albania-Greece circular route, large number of illegal land border crossings whereby economic migrants from Albania cross into Greece for seasonal jobs and then return home. Western Balkan route, land and sea route from the Greek-Turkish border, through Macedonia and Serbia into Hungary or Croatia. Mostly used by Asian immigrants, from Syria, Afghanistan and Iraq, but also used by large numbers of migrants from Western Balkan countries themselves, primarily Kosovo. Eastern Mediterranean route, passage used by migrants, mostly Asian, crossing from Turkey into EU via Greece, Bulgaria or Cyprus. Large portions of these migrants continue along the Western Balkan route towards Hungary. Eastern Borders route, the 6,000 kilometers long land border between EU's eastern member countries and Russia, Belarus, Ukraine, and Moldova. In addition, an Arctic route, from Russia via to Sør-Varanger in Norway, had emerged by September 2015 and was becoming one of the fastest growing routes to enter Western Europe by November 2015. This route was closed for a while in 2016, after Russia and Norway decided to curb movement through Salla and Lota for migrants, allowing only Russian, Norwegian and Belarusian citizens to access it. Frontex tracks and publishes data on numbers of illegal crossings along the main 6 routes twice a year. The following table shows the data for the period up to and including the year 2015. Austria. On August 27, 2015, 71 migrants were found dead in an unventilated food truck near Vienna. As an official response to this event, on August 31, 2015, Austria began inspections of vehicles for smuggled immigrants entering from across the border with Hungary, leading to vehicular backups of 19 kilometers, 12 miles, and trains stalled for hours. Late on September 4, 2015, Chancellor Werner Faymann of Austria, in conjunction with Chancellor Angela Merkel of Germany, announced that migrants would be allowed to cross the border from Hungary into Austria and onward to Germany, and early on September 5, 2015, buses with migrants began crossing the Austro-Hungarian border. Austria noted that 6,500 migrants had crossed the border by the afternoon of September 5, 2015, with 2,200 already on their way to Germany. On September 14, 2015, Austria followed Germany's suit and instituted border controls of its own at the border with Hungary. Austrian authorities also deployed the Austrian army to the border with Hungary. On September 19, 2015, Austria permitted entry to approximately 10,000 migrants from Slovenia and Hungary. Austria has taken on the role of regulator of the flow of migrants destined for Germany by feeding, housing and providing them healthcare in transit. On October 28, 2015, Austria decided to build a fence along its border with Slovenia, that has a total length of 91 kilometers, to be able to control the migrants in an orderly manner, said Minister of the Interior Joanna Michael-Leitner. On January 20, 2016, Austria announced it would limit the number of asylum applicants to 37,500 in each of the next 4 years, compared to the 90,000 applications in 2015. On February 19, 2016, Austria started putting a daily cap of 80 asylum seekers allowed to enter the country to apply for Austrian asylum, and a maximum of 3,200 allowed daily to transit towards other countries, de facto most of them to Germany. The EU's Migration Commissioner said the cap was incompatible with Austria's obligations under EU and international law. The EU Council of Ministers legal team however concluded that Austria's moves are not illegal. In February 2018, Austrian authorities planned to stop providing food and accommodation to rejected asylum applicants. The proposed legislation introduces penalties between €5,000 to €1,500 for those who remain in Austria, with those refusing to leave to be detained. The applicant lying about his identity would face a €500 fine. According to the Interior Ministry, application from Afghans, Nigerians and Pakistanis had mainly been rejected. From April 2018, Austrian authorities would confiscate mobile phones of migrants in order to use its geographical data to verify how the migrant arrived to the country. If migrants are found to have entered by a country covered by the Dublin regulation, they will be sent there. To cover the cost of handling the application, €840 is demanded. Croatia. Croatia, an EU member state since 2013, shares a land border, 527 kilometers, with Serbia and therefore experienced a strong inflow of migrants from Serbia after Hungary erected a fence on its border with Serbia. Nearly 80% of the border consists of the Danube River, but there is a 70-kilometer-long segment of land border in Sirmia, in the forests and fields near Tovarnik. Also, parts of the Croatia-Serbia border are known minefields, which represent a considerable threat. According to the Croatian Minister of Interior Ranko Ostojić, police in the area have enough people and equipment to protect the Croatian border against illegal immigrants. Croatian President Kolinda Grabar-Kitarović and First Deputy Prime Minister Vesna Pusic have so far rejected the option of building a fence along the Croatian border with Serbia. Croatian Prime Minister Zoran Milanović said his country is ready to help refugees coming to Europe, insisting that people fleeing conflict should be given the right to remain in the EU. On September 15, 2015, Croatia started to experience the first major waves of refugees, who carved out a new route through Europe after Hungary sealed its borders. On September 15, 2015, Hungary announced it would start arresting people crossing the border illegally, and as of early 16 September, Hungary had detained 519 people and pressed criminal charges against 46 for trespassing. Thousands of migrants were subsequently led to pursue alternative routes through Croatia from Serbia. After Hungary closed its border with Serbia on 15 September, migrants headed towards the Serbian town of Sid, less than 10 kilometers from the Croatian border. Several buses filled with migrants arrived on the Croatian border crossing of Tovarnik, where the Croatian Vukovar's region county care and rescue teams as well as the Croatian Red Cross were on standby awaiting migrants. On 17 September, as of 3:30 a.m., more than 5,000 migrants had arrived in Tovarnik. Interior Minister Ranko Ostojić said Croatia was absolutely full by the evening of September 17, 2015, and Croatia decided to close its border with Serbia. Train lines from Serbia via Croatia to Slovenia were closed until further notice. As of October 6, 2015, 125,000 had entered Croatia in the space of 3 weeks. Between mid-September and mid-October 2015, about 200,000 migrants had passed through Croatia, most moving on to Hungary. On October 17, 2015, Hungary closed its border with Croatia to migrants, forcing diversion of migrants to Slovenia instead. However, Slovenia, with a population of only 2 million, stated that it would only be able to admit 2,500 people per day, stranding thousands of migrants in Croatia as well as Serbia and Macedonia, while new migrants continued to add to this backlog. In late December 2015, Slovenia put up a razor wire fence on the border with western Croatian regions of Istria and Gorski Kotar, of which the latter is a habitat of the lynx and the brown bear, which are both endangered and protected by law in Croatia. Local hunters have found deer killed by the fence. The WWF and the inhabitants of the regions from both sides of the border have protested against the decision to put up the razor wire fence. On March 9, 2016, Croatia started implementing border restrictions on the border with Serbia, aiming to reinstate the Schengen rules. Denmark. Starting on September 6, 2015, large groups of migrants who declined to apply for asylum in Germany started passing the Danish borders, with the majority heading for Sweden. Initially, the Danish police attempted to register all migrants in accordance with EU rules, but many refused, instead wishing to seek asylum in Sweden, eventually resulting in a scuffle of about 50 people on 9 September at the Padberg rail station. On 9 September, Denmark suspended all rail and ferry links with Germany, reopened the following day. On the same day, parts of the E45 motorway was closed for vehicles to avoid accidents as hundreds of migrants were walking along it in southern Jutland towards Sweden. It was reopened a few hours later when the walking migrants exited the motorway. After initial uncertainty surrounding the rules, it was decided that migrants wishing to continue to other Nordic countries and refusing to seek asylum in Denmark would be allowed to pass. In the 5 weeks following 6 September alone, approximately 28,800 migrants passed the Danish borders. 3,500 of these applied for asylum in Denmark and the remaining continued to other Nordic countries. After Sweden introduced ID checks on the Danish border to prevent undocumented migrants from coming to Sweden, Denmark also reintroduced border controls on the Danish-German border in January 2016, wanting to avoid predicted accumulation of illegal migrants on their way to Sweden is one of the reasons for this decision. In October 2016, Danish Immigration Minister Inger Støjberg authorities reported 50 cases of suspected radicalized asylum seekers at asylum centers. The reports encompassed everything from adult Islamic State sympathizers celebrating terror attacks to violent children who dress up as IS fighters decapitating teddy bears. Støjberg expressed her consternation at asylum seekers ostensibly fleeing war yet simultaneously supporting violence. Asylum centers having detected radicalization routinely report their findings to police. The 50 incidents were reported between November 17, 2015 until September 14, 2016. In October 2017, the Danish migration agency Udlændingestyrelsen rejected over 600 asylum applications because the applicants had lied about their national identity in order to achieve preferential treatment. France. Migrants entering France illegally by train from Italy were returned to Italy by French police since border controls were introduced in July 2015. Due to poor housing, lower social benefits and a thorough asylum application process, France is not commonly considered attractive enough to seek asylum in. Thus many of them seek to enter the United Kingdom, resulting in camps of migrants around Calais, where one of the Eurotunnel entrances is located. During the summer of 2015, at least 9 people died in attempts to reach Britain, including falling from, or being hit by trains, and drowning in a canal at the Eurotunnel entrance. Migrants from the camps also attempt to enter trucks bound for the UK, with some truck drivers being threatened by migrants, and cargo being stolen or damaged. In response, a UK-financed fence was built along the A216 highway in Calais. At the camp near Calais, known as the Jungle, riots broke out when authorities started to demolish the illegally constructed campsite on January 29, 2015. Amid the protests, which included hunger strikes, thousands of refugees living in the camp were relocated to France's first international standard refugee camp of La Lanière refugee camp in Grand Santé, which replaced the predecessor encampment at Bosbrook refugee camp. Finland. On September 13, 2015, it was reported that the local authorities had estimated the flow of 300 asylum seekers per day entering via the northern land border from Sweden into Tornio, which is the main route of migration flow into Finland. The total number of asylum seekers for the year was reported to be over 2.6 times the total amount for the whole of the previous year. During October 2015, 7,058 new asylum seekers arrived in Finland. In mid-October, the number of asylum seekers entering Finland during 2015 reached 27,000, which is, in relation to the country's size, the fourth largest in Europe. In late November, the number passed 30,000, nearly tenfold increase compared to the previous year. More than 60% of asylum seekers who arrived during 2015 came from Iraq. In late October, the Finnish immigration service, Migrant, changed its guidelines about areas in Iraq which are recognized as safe by the Finnish authorities, putting Iraqi asylum seekers under closer scrutiny. The Interior Minister Petteri Orpo estimated that 2 in 3 of recent asylum seekers come to Finland in hopes of higher standard of living. In November, the Permanent Secretary of the Interior Ministry stated that approximately 60 to 65% of the recent applications for asylum will be denied. In September, the processing time of an asylum application was estimated to be extended from normal 6 months up to 2 years. In late November, the reception centers were reported to be running out of space, forcing the authorities resorting to refurbished shipping containers and tents to house new asylum seekers. Interior Minister Petteri Orpo has announced that special repatriation centers would be established. These centers would be inhabited by the asylum seekers whose applications were declined. While he stressed that these camps would not be prisons, he described the inhabitants would be under strict surveillance. In January 2016, Yle, Finland's national public broadcasting company, reported that a Russian border guard had admitted that the Federal Security Service was enabling migrants to enter Finland. In 2017, hundreds Muslim asylum seekers from Iraq and Afghanistan converted to Christianity after having had their first asylum application rejected by the Finnish Immigration Service, Migrant, in order to reapply for asylum on the grounds of religious persecution. Germany. Germany has been the most sought-after final destination in the EU migrant and refugee crisis. Thousands of migrants continue to pour into Germany from Austria as of September 6, 2015. Germany's asylum practice is to be based on Article 16A of her Basic Law. After the development of the migrant crisis, Germany decided to use the derogation possibility of Article 17 of the Dublin III regulation for humanitarian reasons. According to the Wall Street Journal, this unilateral open arms policy triggered both a domestic and an international backlash. However, Germany immediately began to deploy a quota system to distribute asylum seekers among all German states. In September 2015, the federal states, responsible for accommodation, reached the brink of their capacities and criticized the government in Berlin for its inconsiderate approach to the crisis. The Interior Minister announced on September 13, 2015, the introduction of temporary controls on the southern border with Austria and explained the measure with reference to security concerns. The restrictions incorporated a temporary suspension of rail travel from Austria and allowed spot checks on automobiles. On 5 October, the German tabloid Bild claimed to possess a secret document stating that the number of asylum seekers would increase to 1.5 million by the end of 2015. This report was immediately disclaimed by the German Ministry of the Interior, which restated its own estimate of 800,000 applicants only. Germany has followed the policy of treating migrants under 18 years of age as children first and refugees second, giving them according to the Convention on the Rights of the Child the same rights as German children. In late October 2015, the small village of Sumt, population 102, was told by Lower Saxony officials that it would receive 750 asylum seekers. In January 2016, 18 of 31 men suspected of violent assaults on women in Cologne on New Year's Eve were identified as asylum seekers, prompting calls by German officials to deport convicted criminals who may be seeking asylum. These sexual attacks, along with the wave of terrorist attacks, brought about a fresh wave of anti-immigrant protests across Europe. Between January and December 2015, 1,091,894 arrivals of asylum seekers were registered in Germany's EASY system for the first distribution of asylum seekers among Germany's federal states. However, asylum applications in 2015 were only 476,649. Because many asylum seekers had not formally applied for asylum yet or did not stop in Germany and moved on to other EU states. In February 2016, the German government admitted that it had lost track of around 13% of the 1.1 million people registered as asylum seekers on arrival in 2015, because they never arrived at the refugee accommodation they were assigned. The German government said that probably many of the missing asylum seekers simply went to other European countries, while others continued to live illegally in Germany. Merkel's immigration policies are being criticized in the Christian Social Union, e.g. by the CSU chairman Horst Seehofer. In October 2016, Angela Merkel traveled to African countries Mali and Niger. The diplomatic visit took place in order to discuss how their governments could improve conditions which cause people to flee those countries and how illegal migration through and from these countries could be reduced. In November 2016, Germany security officials cracked down on the militant Salafist organization Divara Religion as these preachers had targeted newly arrived migrants with their violent form of Islam. In January 2017, it was reported by Deutsche Welle that welfare authorities in Braunschweig had been targeted in 300 cases of migrant fraud as individuals registered many identities in order to receive multiple welfare payouts. Each case of migrant fraud averaged thousands of euros of loss, with the most prolific fraudster having registered 12 identities. The majority of the cases concerned Sudanese migrants. Authorities had at times been overwhelmed by registering 2,000 migrants per day, and normal checks like fingerprints are now retroactively required. One BAMF official allegedly accepted bribes and kickbacks for asylum, and 18,000 asylum approvals were now in question. The Bremen office was stripped of its authority to grant asylums. 13 other offices were being investigated on suspicion of similar irregularities. A report by the German Federal Criminal Police Office on crime in the context of immigration found that immigrants were responsible for 16.6% of all theft, 10% of fraud, 11% of all violent crime, 7.6% of drug crime, 9.1% of sexual crimes, and 15% of all crime resulting in loss of life. 2016 saw a 52.7% increase in immigrant crime in 2016 alone. The percentage of sexual offenses where at least one suspect was an immigrant increased from 1.8% in 2012 to 9.1% in 2016. The migrant crisis has spurred right-wing electoral preferences across Germany, with the Alternative for Germany, AfD, gaining significant electoral success in the 2017 German federal election. These developments have prompted debates over the reasons for increased right-wing populism in Germany. Literature argues that the increased right-wing preferences are a result of the European migrant crisis, which has brought thousands of people, predominantly from Muslim countries, to Germany, and spurred a perception among a share of Germans that refugees constitute an ethnic and cultural threat to Germany. Greece. Migrants arrive from the Middle East making the 6-kilometer, 4 miles, water crossing to the Greek islands of Chios, Kos, Lesbos, Leros, Castellarizo, Agathonisi, Pharmakonisi, Rhodes, Samos, Simi, and other islands which are close to Turkey and are thus a quick and easy access border into Europe. Some arrive via the Evros border crossing from Turkey. As of June 2015, 124,000 migrants had arrived into Greece, a 750% increase from 2014, mainly refugees stemming from the wars in Syria, Iraq, and Afghanistan. Greece appealed to the European Union for assistance, whilst the UNHCR European Director Vincent Cockatell said facilities for migrants on the Greek islands were totally inadequate and the islands in total chaos. Frontex's Operation Poseidon, aimed at patrolling the Aegean Sea, is badly underfunded and undermanned, with only 11 coastal patrol vessels, 1 ship, 2 helicopters, 2 aircraft, and a budget of €18 million. Human traffickers charge illegal immigrants $1,000 to $1,500 for the 25-minute boat ride from Bodrum, Turkey to Kos. In August 2015, hundreds of boats made the crossing carrying illegal immigrants every night. The migrants travel onward to Thessaloniki and the mainland of Greece and estimate that it will cost them €3,000 to €4,000 to reach Germany, and €10,000 or €12,000 to reach Britain. Desperate migrants have fought brawls over places in boats leaving Bodrum for Kos. Airlines charge passengers usually less than $400 for one-way economy class tickets from Turkey to Germany or Britain, but a rule in the Schengen Agreement requires airlines to check that all passengers have a visa or are exempt from visa. In September 2015, the photos of dead 3-year-old Alan Kurdi, who drowned when he and his family were in a small inflatable boat which capsized shortly after leaving Bodrum trying to reach the Greek island of Kos, made headlines around the world. Konstantinos Verdakis, the top EU diplomat in Baghdad, told the New York Times that at least 250 Iraqis per day had been landing on Greek islands between mid-August and early September 2015. On January 27, 2016, The European Commission accused Greece of neglecting its obligations under the Schengen Agreement to carry out external border controls, saying that a visit by EU inspectors in November 2015 found that Greece was failing to identify and register arrivals properly, to fingerprint everyone and to check travel documents for authenticity and against security databases. On 12 February, the EU gave Greece a 3-month deadline to fix its border controls, or other member states could be authorized to extend border controls for up to 2 years instead of the normal 6 months. On 11 February, NATO announced that it was going to deploy ships in the Aegean Sea to deter people smugglers taking migrants from Turkey to Greece, the first 3 ships being the Royal Canadian Navy's HMCS Fredericton, FFH 337, Turkish Naval Forces' TCG Barbaros, F-244, and German Navy's Bonn, A-1413, from NATO's SNMG-2. NATO Chief Jens Stoltenberg said the mission would not be about stopping or pushing back refugee boats, but about intelligence gathering and sharing information with Turkey and Greece, both NATO allies. On March 1, 2016, the Greek government asked the EU for €480 million in emergency funds to shelter 100,000 refugees. The Republic of Macedonia closed its border with Greece on March 9, 2016, where 12,000 to 13,000 migrants were stuck at Idomeni on the Greek side, while the total number of migrants throughout Greece are estimated to be more than 50,000. After the 2016 Turkish coup d'état attempt, Greek authorities on a number of Aegean islands have called for emergency measures to curtail a growing flow of refugees from Turkey. The number of migrants and refugees willing to make the journey across the Aegean has increased noticeably. At Athens, officials voiced worries that Turkish monitors overseeing the deal in Greece had been abruptly pulled out after the failed coup, with little sign of them being replaced. Also, the mayor of Kos expressed concern in a letter to the Greek Prime Minister, citing the growing influx of refugees and migrants after the failed coup. The Association of Greek Tourism Enterprises, SETE, warned about the prospect of another flare-up in the refugee/migrant crisis due to the Turkish political instability. In September 2016, Greek volunteers of the Hellenic Rescue Team and human rights activist Filat Saudi were awarded the Nansen Refugee Award by the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, UNHCR, for their tireless volunteer work to aid refugees arriving in Greece during the 2015 refugee crisis. In December 2017, the Hellenic Rescue Team received the award Mother Teresa by the Harmony Foundation. The Greek team was rewarded for their heroic actions and their effort to save human lives while risking their own during the migrant and refugee crisis. Hungary. Migrants taking the Western Balkan route cross into the Schengen area first in Greece. In June 2015, Hungary said it was contemplating countermeasures against the influx of illegal immigrants from Serbia, a non-EU and non-Schengen state. On June 17, 2015, the Hungarian government announced the construction of a 4-meter-high, 13 feet, 175-kilometer-long, 109 miles, fence along its southern border with Serbia. The European Commission warned EU members against steps that contravene EU obligations and urged members like Hungary to find other ways to cope with an inflow of illegal migrants. The first phase of the construction was finished at the end of August, and Prime Minister Viktor Orbán announced that it would be fully completed by the end of 2015. On September 3, 2015, Hungary's Prime Minister, Viktor Orbán, defended the country's management of the migrant situation internally, notwithstanding chaos at Budapest's main international rail station, while criticizing Germany and Europe overall for not dissuading migrants from entering Europe. On the same day, Hungarian police let migrants board a train in Budapest heading west, then stopped it in Bécske and tried to transport migrants to a registration camp there. The migrants refused to cooperate and remained on the train, which did not travel further west. On September 4, 2015, about 1,000 of the migrants at Railway Station East, Keleti Paladvar, set off by foot toward Austria and Germany. On the same night, the Hungarian government decided to send buses to transport illegal migrants to Asylum, on the border with Austria. On September 14, 2015, it was reported that the Hungarian police were blocking the route from Serbia, and that the regular entry point was heavily manned with officers, soldiers and helicopters hovering above, sealing this border with a razor wire and detaining migrants crossing the border illegally with the threat of arrest and criminal charges. On September 15, 2015, Hungary sealed its border with Serbia. Several hundred migrants broke the fence between Hungary and Serbia twice on Wednesday 16 September, and threw chunks of concrete and water bottles over the fence. Hungarian police reacted with tear gas and water cannons at Horgosz 2 border crossing. Belgrade protested these actions. A 20-year-old Iraqi refugee was sentenced to deportation and 1-year entry ban in Hungary, as well as €80 in court fees, according to the new law put into action a few days before. On 18 September, Hungary started building another fence, this time along the border with Croatia, a fellow EU member state, but not part of the Schengen area. Within 2 weeks, tens of thousands of refugees crossed from Croatia into Hungary, most of whom went toward the Austrian border. On October 16, 2015, Hungary announced that it would close its green border with Croatia to migrants, and since 17 October onward, thousands of migrants daily were diverted to Slovenia instead. In December 2015, Hungary challenged EU plans to share asylum seekers across EU states at the European Court of Justice. The border has been closed since September 15, 2015, with razor wire fence along its southern borders, particularly Croatia, and by blocking train travel. The government believes that illegal migrants are job seekers, threats to security and likely to threaten our culture. There have been cases of immigrants and ethnic minorities being attacked. In addition, Hungary has conducted wholesale deportations of refugees, who are generally considered to be allied with ISIL. Refugees are outlawed and almost all are ejected. On March 9, 2016, Hungary declared a state of emergency for the whole of the country, and was deploying 1,500 soldiers to the borders. In August 2017, the state of emergency was extended to March 2018. Italy. Since 2014, thousands of migrants have been trying every month to cross the central Mediterranean to Italy, risking their lives on unsafe boats including fishing trawlers. Many of them are fleeing poverty-stricken homelands or war-torn countries and seeking economic opportunity within the EU. Italy, and, in particular, its southern island of Lampedusa, receives enormous numbers of Africans and Middle Easterners transported by smugglers operating along the ungoverned coast of the failed state of Libya. In 2014, 170,100 migrants arrived in Italy by sea, a 296% increase compared to 2013. 141,484 of the travelers ferried over from Libya. Most of the migrants had come from Syria, Eritrea and various countries in West Africa. From January to April 2015, about 1,600 migrants died on the route from Libya to Lampedusa, making it the deadliest migrant route in the world. As a consequence of the April 2015 Libya migrant shipwrecks, the EU launched a military operation known as Operation Sophia. More than 13,000 migrants had been rescued from the sea in the course of the operation as of April 2016. There were 153,842 Mediterranean Sea arrivals to Italy in 2015, 9% less than the previous year. Most of the refugees and migrants came from Eritrea, Nigeria, and Somalia, whereas the number of Syrian refugees sharply decreased, as most of them took the eastern Mediterranean route from Turkey to Greece. The first 3 months of 2016 saw an increase in the number of migrants rescued at sea being brought to southern Italian ports. In April 2016, nearly 6,000 mostly sub-Saharan African migrants have landed in Italy in just 4 days. In June 2016, over 10,000 migrants have been rescued in just 4 days. In 2016, 181,100 migrants arrived in Italy by sea. In April 2017, more than 8,000 migrants were rescued near Libya and brought to Italy in just 3 days. Based on UN data, about 80,000 refugees were registered at Italian refugee centers in the first half of 2017, an increase of 14% compared to the same time period in 2016. In June 2017, 10,000 asylum seekers were picked up in the Mediterranean Sea by the Italian Coast Guard and other naval vessels in just a couple of days. EU Ambassador Maurizio Massari has expressed concern about the recent uptake of refugee arrivals on Italian's coastline, which would reach 200,000 in 2017. As a result, foreign aid vessels docking in Italian ports may no longer be able to do so because of stricter admission policies and exceeded limits in Italian asylum centers. In February 2017, Italian government accepted to fund Libyan Coast Guard. Since then, many migrants were forced to go back to Libya. In July 2017, Italy drew up a code of conduct for NGO rescue vessels delivering migrants to Italian ports. These rules include: except in situations of imminent danger, not to enter the territorial waters of Libya. Never to switch off the Automatic Identification System, AIS, and LRIC transponders if they are installed on the ship. Not to signal human traffickers with flares or radio to coordinate with them when to send out their dinghies. Not to transfer those rescued onto other vessels. Commit to carrying a policeman to travel on board whenever requested in order to identify and prosecute human traffickers among the migrants. Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International have criticized the code of conduct, and some NGOs like MSF refused to sign. Italian authorities feared that rather than saving lives, the NGO operations encouraged more people to try the very dangerous passage facilitated by human traffickers. NGO ships not behaving according to the code could be refused access to Italian ports. After the entry into force of the NGO code, in July 2017, arrivals decreased by 52.5% compared to the same month of 2016, from 23,552 to 11,183. And in August 2017, arrivals decreased by 85%, from 21,294 to 3,914. Also, all NGO, except SOS Mediterranee, have withdrawn their ships from the Mediterranean. From January to November 2017, some 114,600 migrants arrived in Italy by sea. Approximately 5,000 African migrants were rescued in waters off the coast of Libya between 18 May 20, 2017. Since 2013, the country took in over 700,000 migrants, mainly from sub-Saharan Africa. Malta. Between 2008 and 2012, Malta received on average the highest number of asylum seekers compared to its national population, 21.7 applicants per 1,000 inhabitants. In 2011, most of these asylum applications were submitted by nationals of Somalia, Nigeria, Eritrea, and Syria. In 2012, more than half of the requests were by Somalian nationals alone. In a 2013 news story, The Guardian reported, before Malta joined the EU in 2004, immigration levels were negligible. Because it is located close to North Africa, it has now become a gateway for migrants seeking entry to Europe. Following the arrival of asylum seekers, Malta was unable to cope with accommodating asylum seekers in a manner which was congruent with EU standards on the reception of asylum seekers, particularly standards related to housing. In 2015, very few migrants arrived in Malta compared to previous years, since most of those rescued were taken to Italy. In September, 78 migrants rescued by the armed forces of Malta refused to be brought to Malta. They insisted on going to Italy, and were eventually taken there. Melilla and Ceuta, Spain. Melilla and Ceuta, two autonomous Spanish cities on the north coast of Africa bordering Morocco, are the only EU territories to share a land border with an African country. The number of undocumented migrants hoping to reach the EU via Melilla or Ceuta grew in 2014. Between January and September 2015, only 100 people out of 3,700 hopefuls have managed to cross the Melilla border fence, down from 2,100 people from 19,000 attempts the previous year. In October 2015, 165 people were rescued from 14 attempts to cross the Strait of Gibraltar to reach Ceuta. In a report published on November 17, 2015, Amnesty International called on Spain to cease cooperation with Morocco on immigration matters because of alleged human rights abuses on the Melilla and Ceuta borders. Amnesty said it has photographs, images and evidence of blows with sticks, feet and stones on migrants attempting to get to Spain. Other reports accuse Spain of using rubber bullets and tear gas to prevent migrants from reaching Spanish territory. The Spanish government said that it has now banned its border guards from using rubber bullets to repel migrants. Migrants have been found trying to smuggle themselves into Ceuta and Melilla in cars and suitcases, including in March 2016, when migrants were discovered hiding in impossibly small spaces in a car at the Melilla border crossing, with some in the dashboard area and some under the back seat. According to the authorities, people are found hiding in cars almost every day. Also, in May 2015, an 8-year-old boy from Ivory Coast was found in a suitcase being smuggled into Ceuta. When the police opened the case, They found him in a terrible state. And in December 2016, one migrant was found in a suitcase, carried by a Moroccan woman, trying to get into Ceuta. On January 1, 2017, there was an attempt by 1,100 migrants to cross the Ceuta border fence. 50 Moroccans and 5 Spanish border guards prevented them from crossing the fence, but one border guard lost an eye during the attempt. Norway. The number of migrants crossing from Russia into Norway increased from a handful in the first half of 2015 to 420 asylum seekers crossing by bicycle in September 2015 alone. As of December 11, 2015, over 4,000 migrants had crossed the northern border, and the Norwegian government vowed to send all migrants with Russian residence visa back to Russia even if they were from countries experiencing conflicts such as Afghanistan. In 2016, 5,500 asylum seekers illegally entered Norway from Russia. Norway began sending migrants back to conflict-torn countries of origin, such as Afghanistan, defying Amnesty International. The number of migrants returned from Europe to Afghanistan between 2015-16 nearly tripled from 3,290 to 9,460. Because it is illegal to drive from Russia to Norway without proper legal permission, and crossing on foot is prohibited, the migrants make the crossing on bicycles. It was in 2016 decided that a barrier will be located at the Storskog border crossing. It will be built of steel and will stand 660 feet, 200 meters, long and 11 feet, 3.4 meters, to 12 feet, 3.7 meters, high. Norwegian officials aim to complete the barrier before winter temperatures harden the ground. In 2018, Statistics Norway reported that of recently arrived migrants from Syria there was a high proportion, 67%, with only basic education, Norwegian, grunnskole. Slovenia. Slovenia established temporary controls on the otherwise unsupervised border with Hungary in the northeast on September 17, 2015, following Germany and Austria's similar actions. On 18 September, Slovenia experienced the first larger and largely illegal border crossing occurrences, coming mostly from Croatia, already overwhelmed by the large influx of migrant groups. On the evening of 18 September, the Slovenian riot police were forced to use pepper spray on a bridge at the Hrmika border to prevent migrants and activists from illegally crossing the border from Croatia. By midday of 19 September, the country had registered around 1,500 migrants, with all of them being accommodated in temporary reception camps or asylum centers. The largest traffic was seen at Obrežje border crossing, Dobova border crossing and Bracis. Prime Minister Miro Cerar visited the reception center in Bracis on Saturday, stressing that Slovenia had the situation under control, while criticizing the Croatian government for being uncooperative. There were also various humanitarian and non-governmental organizations aiding the migrants on the border, coming mostly from Slovenia, Croatia, and Austria. On October 18, 2015, Slovenia began restricting admission to 2,500 migrants per day, stranding migrants in Croatia as well as Serbia and Macedonia. From 18 October, the country began receiving large numbers of refugees, which soon exceeded the upper admission limit of 2,500. On 22 October, the police reported 12,600 migrant arrivals in 24 hours, reportedly a record, and more than Hungary had received in any one day. The Slovenian government also passed a law giving the army more powers and asked the EU for aid. The latter responded by sending the Commissioner for Migration to Slovenia, and announcing a mini-EU summit. On the same day the Slovenian government accused the Croatian police of leading migrants through cold waters in an effort to bypass the Slovene controls by crossing the green border, and released a nighttime thermovision video apparently showing the events on the preceding night. By 24 October, Slovenia had reported more than 56,000 total migrant arrivals. On 10 November, Prime Minister Cerar announced that Slovenia would impose temporary technical hurdles to control migrants, but that the country would not close border crossings. On 11 November, Slovenian military personnel began the construction of the fence consisting of razor wire. The Austrian Minister of the Interior Joanna Michael-Leitner expressed full support for the Slovenian government's action on the border with Croatia. On February 23, 2016, German press noted that Slovenia decided to deploy army on the border facing Croatia, to assist the police. It was noted that the bill did not approve military action, however noting that the army was still authorized to use force in the case of emergency. Spain. In 2017, Spain saw a huge increase in the number of asylum applicants, fast catching up to Italy and Greece in terms of popularity as a destination country, with nearly 8,300 people trying to enter in the first half of this year itself. There are a few reasons for this. First, the price of migration from Morocco to Spain has dropped by nearly half to £800 per person. Second, people are less willing to travel through war-torn Libya, which serves as a stepping stone to Italy. And third, the surging numbers of immigrants from Africa make the Western Mediterranean route a more convenient one to use, giving direct access to Spain. Boat migration from North Africa to mainland Spain across the Strait of Gibraltar and the Alboran Sea is increasing. On August 7, 2017, more than 300 mostly sub-Saharan Africans ambushed Spanish and Moroccan security forces and stormed the border crossing at El Tarajal. 186 migrants made it onto Spanish territory. On 8 August, more than 1,000 migrants armed with spears and rocks attempted to breach the same crossing. On 9 August, Spanish authorities closed the border for a week. On 10 August, around 700 migrants stormed the border, 200 migrants were arrested. Meanwhile, on August 9, 2017, a video showed a rubber boat carrying dozens of migrants arrive at a beach full of sunbathers in Cadiz. José Moraver, the head of the rescue center in nearby Tarifa, told The Telegraph that a second boat had landed on another beach in the area and that this scene was now a regular occurrence. "Every day there are boats, every day there is migration," he said. "The situation is getting very complicated." The International Organization for Migration recorded a 217% increase in the first 7 months of 2017 compared with the same period in 2016, when more than 8,000 arrived throughout the year. Authorities believe that Spain is ill-equipped to handle the surging numbers of migrants. Reports of women and children being kept in inhumane conditions have surfaced, pushing governments and organizations to devise short-term policies to help curb the pressure. Several deaths are recorded on a daily basis, both at the destination and during the journey, but this does not deter migrants, who are more economic migrants than war refugees, coming mostly from Western African nations such as Gambia, Guinea, Senegal, etc. Sweden. During all of 2015, migration authorities reported 500 cases of suspected terrorism links or war criminals to Swedish security service. 20 individuals were denied asylum in 2015 due to war crimes. In November 2015, Sweden reintroduced border controls for arrivals, including the Öresund Bridge. This did not have so much effect on the inflow of asylum seekers, since they had the right to apply for asylum once they were on Swedish ground. In December 2015, Sweden passed a temporary law that allows the government to oblige all transport companies to check that their passengers carry valid photographic identification before border crossing. The new law came into effect on December 21, 2015 and is valid until December 21, 2018. The government decided that the new rules will apply from January 4, 2016 until July 4, 2016. The new law led to the mandatory train change and passage through border control at Copenhagen Airport Station for travelers between Copenhagen and Sweden, and with a reduction in service frequency. On the first day of border controls, this led to a reduction in the number of migrants arriving to southern Sweden from the previous hundreds to some dozens. Within hours of Swedish border control becoming effective, Denmark in turn created a border control between Denmark and Germany. The migration pattern also changed, with the majority of those arriving by ferry from Germany to Trelleborg instead of by train to Hilly Station, bypassing the border control between Denmark and Germany. Migrants then started taking taxis in greater numbers over the Öresund Bridge in order to evade identification. 3 days later, a Danish cab driver was arrested for human trafficking near the Öresund Bridge. In January 2016, newspaper Sydsvenskan reported that the migration flow had led to an increase of MRSA infections in southernmost Skåne province, where many migrants are received, from 160 cases in 2005 to more than 635 cases in 2015. In January 2016, Interior Minister Anders Ygeman said that Sweden was rejecting about 45% of asylum applications, which meant that around 60,000 to 80,000 of the 160,000 asylum seekers who applied for asylum in 2015 could be deported in coming years. According to the National Board of Health and Welfare in 2016, an estimated 20 to 30% of asylum seekers suffered from mental disorder. Of the 162,000 who migrated to Sweden in 2015, By May 2016 only 500 had found employment, where employment constituted more than 1 hour of work per week or state-subsidized schemes. In late June 2016 the Swedish parliament voted for more restrictive policy with a large majority in favor. As a result, residence permits will be temporary and immigration of family members will be curtailed, along with higher demands of proof to be able to support immigrating relatives. These measures are to be valid for 3 years. The law applies retroactively on everyone who arrived 24th of November onwards and came into effect July 20, 2016. These measures put Sweden in line with the minimum line of requirements mandated by the EU. 30 individuals were denied asylum January to June 2016 due to war crimes. In August 2016 4 workers at asylum centers for refugee children were reported to have been infected by tuberculosis, and health services reported a marked increase in tuberculosis infections due to the crisis. In 2015 an increase of 22% on the previous year was noted. This was largely attributed to an increased inflow of migrants over that year. 90% of people infected with tuberculosis were born abroad. In October 2016 a leaked internal memo from the cabinet showed that spending cuts to all public services had become necessary due to the escalating costs of the migration crisis. In January 2017 police described gangs of recently arrived youth making the central shopping mall of Gothenburg unsafe at night with muggings and violence over drug trade between gangs of Moroccan, Afghani and Syrian origin. Police work is made difficult by the Swedish Migration Agency, which has neglected to identify arriving migrants, leading to an arrested individual's fingerprint matching a handful of identities. When offered help from social services the youth declined and preferred a life on the streets, supporting themselves with crime. In May 2017 Border Police reported that it had been possible to verify the identities of 77 migrants from Morocco using fingerprint matches checked against the Moroccan fingerprint database. It was found that out of the 65 had lied about their identity, and of the 50 claiming to be underage, all but 2 were adult. In May 2017 the Swedish National Board of Forensic Medicine started aiding the Swedish Migration Agency with determining the age of migrants claiming to be under 18. The first batch of 518 investigations indicated that 442 were likely adult. Of the 442, 430 were men and 12 women. Up until 2017, the Swedish Migration Agency awarded temporary residence permits also to people considered war criminals and security threats. This allowed these individuals to claim welfare benefits and health care from the state of Sweden. In Falkenberg, the municipality created gender-segregated housing for unaccompanied minors, as the boys would sexually harass the girls and the girls did previously not dare to go out into the communal areas of the accommodations without wearing the veil. With the segregated housing, the girls were able to make better use of the facilities. In June 2017, the Supreme Administrative Court of Sweden, HFD, ruled that illegal immigrants, such as those who stay in hiding after their asylum applications had been rejected in order to evade deportation, had no right to welfare benefits. A woman was denied welfare benefits, SV Socialbidrag, by the Council of Värnamo, and she took the council to court. The first instance, SV Förvaltningsrätten, ruled in the woman's favor, but the council took the case to the highest court HFD, which ruled in favor of the council. In July 2017 Swedish radio reported that few recently arrived migrants who have low education are willing to improve their schooling. About 3 to 4% are taking classes 2 years after receiving a residence permit. Migrants are not generally aware that in order to find steady employment in the job market of Sweden, completed secondary education is a frequent requirement. In August 2017 dozens of Afghani asylum seekers made a demonstration in a square in Stockholm against their pending deportations. They were attacked by a group of 15 to 16 men who threw fireworks at them. 3 protesters were injured and 1 was taken to hospital. None were arrested. In September 2017 staff at the Swedish Migration Agency reported rising levels of death threats and harassment from migrants applying for residence. The nature of the threats changed, with staff members being sought out at their homes or receiving threatening messages on private phones or in social media. In November 2017, Swedish Public Employment Service statistics showed that of the 24,034 recently arrived migrants in Stockholm, 9,324 were women, of whom 3% had found non-subsidized employment, and 14,710 were men, of whom 7% had found non-state subsidized employment. In March 2018, researcher Pernilla Andersson-Una at Stockholm University found that 50% of recently arrived migrants had less than the Swedish 9-year basic education, Swedish, grundskolekompetens. Switzerland. As a non-EU member country but full participant in the Schengen Agreement, The Swiss Confederation was directly affected by the migrant crisis, with most of the refugees arriving from Italy at border crossings in the southern cantons of Ticino and Valais. In the crisis year 2015, almost 40,000 asylum seekers were applying for refugee status. In 2016, this number dropped by 31%, and in the first quarter of 2017 by another 57%, compared to the same time period in 2016. Most of the asylum seekers arriving in Switzerland originate from Eritrea, 49%, followed by Afghanistan, 30%, and Syria. Despite relative restrictive admission policies, and increased patrolling of illegal border crossings, the Swiss have attempted to admit refugees throughout the course of the migrant crisis, and distributed those asylum seekers to the appropriate cantons and city-states. Refugees first receive a temporary residence permit and valid for 6 months while they await approval of their status. Asylum seekers who are not admitted but cannot return to their home country because of health or safety considerations receive a residence permit that allows them to stay in Switzerland. Persons receiving a B permit are admitted refugees according to the Geneva Convention with a full residence allowance for 12 months and possible extensions. Almost 50% of the asylum seekers receive residence permits or are allowed to stay, and about 10% of those rejected can be placed in another Schengen country. With 3.4 asylum seekers per 1,000 inhabitants in 2016, Switzerland processed more asylum applications than the European average at 2.5, Germany at the top of the list with almost 10 asylum seekers/1,000. About 2.5% of asylum seekers in Switzerland are employed. The numbers are higher at 30% for those with temporary permits and at 24% for admitted refugees. In 2016, 85.8% of refugees in Switzerland received welfare payments. Turkey. The vast majority of migrants and refugees entering Europe by sea in 2015, nearly 500,000 by September, arrived from Turkey, according to the United Nations. Turkish officials attempting to deter migration facilitated by smugglers have detained 57,000 travelers and over 100 human traffickers in 2015 through September. Triggers of the summer 2015 crisis. Factors cited as immediate triggers or causes of the sudden and massive increase in migrant numbers in the summer of 2015 along the eastern Mediterranean and western Balkan route, Turkey, Greece, Macedonia, Serbia, Hungary, include. On June 18, 2015, the government of Macedonia announced that it was changing its policy on migrants entering the country legally. Previously, migrants were forbidden from transiting Macedonia, causing those who chose to do so to take perilous, clandestine modes of transit, such as walking along railroad tracks at night. Beginning in June, migrants were given 3-day, temporary asylum permits, enabling them to travel by train and road. The opening of the Macedonia route enabled migrants from the Middle East to take very short, inexpensive voyages from the coast of Turkey to the Greek islands, instead of the far longer, more perilous, and far more expensive voyage from Libya to Italy. According to the Washington Post, in addition to reducing danger, this lowered the cost from around $5 to $6,000 to $2 to $3,000. On August 25, 2015, according to The Guardian, Germany's Federal Agency for Migration and Refugees made it public that the #Dublin procedure for Syrian citizens is at this point in time effectively no longer being adhered to. During a press conference, Germany's Interior Minister, Thomas de Maizière, confirmed that the suspension of the Dublin Agreement was not as such a legally binding act, but more of a guideline for management practice. According to the Washington Post, German Chancellor Angela Merkel's public pledges, at a time of diplomatic standoff with the government of Hungary at the beginning of September, when tens of thousands of refugees were attempting to cross Hungarian territory without getting processed for asylum application in the country, that Germany would offer temporary residency to refugees, combined with television footage of cheering Germans welcoming refugees and migrants arriving in Munich, persuaded large numbers of people to move from Turkey up the Western Balkan route. Syrian President Bashar al-Assad blamed Europe and the United States for the migrant crisis, saying most of the refugees are fleeing the terrorism that he accuses the West of fomenting by supporting elements of the Syrian opposition. Meanwhile, the Syrian government announced increased military conscription, and simultaneously made it easier for Syrians to obtain passports, leading Middle East policy experts to speculate that he was implementing a policy to encourage opponents of his regime to leave the country. Closure of green borders. The entry routes through the Western Balkan have experienced the greatest intensity of border restrictions in the 2015 EU migrant crisis, according to the New York Times and other sources, as follows. Deaths and incidents. Several serious accidents and deaths have occurred in Europe as a result of migrant smuggling, both in the Mediterranean Sea, due to the capsizing of crowded and unseaworthy migrant smuggling vessels, and on European soil, due to the use of standard cargo trucks by smugglers to transport illegal migrants. The vast majority of deaths occurred while persons were being illegally smuggled across the Mediterranean and Aegean seas.